This article talks about assessment, the cost of assessments across the globe, and how some countries are struggling with that. Why does it matter? As we know, assessments are necessary. Educational systems need assessments to determine where they are, but they can be costly. It's something we haven't thought about, is the cost involved with assessments. Low-income countries struggle with paying for assessments. They are just trying to pay for their basic learning costs, and to add assessments nationally or even globally is something that they're really struggling with. And more research and development needs to occur so that these assessments are more manageable and more cost-effective for other countries. It's necessary to evaluate costs because, like I said, the lower income countries are not being able to afford these things. Countries that have money, they can do just fine with this, but some of the others don't. We need them for data to improve our educational systems. They need to be timely, they need to be credible, and they help improve educational outcomes. And a lot of attention rests on these learning assessments. However, budget demands make it difficult for some countries to be able to implement assessments, especially on a large scale. We just naturally assume large-scale educational assessments are part of every country's being, but that isn't true because of costs. The studies are showing that they're not bringing into account the discretionary funds of low-income countries, and the actual costs are needed to determine the benefit of doing these assessments, because not all countries can do even one or multiple assessments. They have to pick and choose when they're going to do them. The article spoke of 4 different educational assessments. There's national assessments that evaluate students on a national educational system level, so it's just in that nation, and most countries participate in some type of national assessment, maybe not every year, but they do try and get those in every so often. Then there's the regional assessments, and that measures student learning across countries, typically defined by a geographic region or shared languages. So it widens it a little bit. Then there's international assessments, which we have studied before in this class. We talked about the PEARLS and the PISA, and then we go into the hybrid assessments, and these focus more on the needs of the LICs. They're smaller, quicker, cheaper, and the one that has been used recently is the early grade reading assessment. It is a smaller test, it's much quicker, and it's much cheaper to implement for the LICs. Cost-benefit analysis. The problems for LICs is their budgets are tight. They have little to spare for assessments, especially on a global level. It's not always the money, but they don't have the qualified people to administer the assessments. You don't realize that it does take some knowledge and education to be able to actually administer the assessments and get them graded correctly and all that kind of stuff. And they don't have the funds to hire outside expertise. So they need to focus their funds on basics, like improving just the learning and the teaching that's going on in their countries. The cost of testing. There's the overt costs. Those are usually planned for in advance. They're included in a budget. They include the basic staff costs, the training, the travel, supplies, equipment, rollout management, those types of things. But they don't plan for the hidden costs. And those include buildings for the testing. Some of these low-income countries don't have major buildings where students can go in and be tested. They don't have maintenance on computers, if they have computers at all. They have to pay secondary staff to come in and monitor and do all these different types of things. So we just don't, they just don't have the money for it. Unfortunately, there are more choices available than resources for the LICs. That's why the EGRA is such a good innovation for them. It is needs-centered. It focuses on, specific needs in their educational system. It's just enough. It shrinks upfront costs. It reduces turnaround time. And to get our other tests going in this direction, they need to consider scale, timeliness, and cost efficiency. And that way, the large-scale educational assessments for low-income countries would be more cost-effective for them and work better for them. In the end, there will always be costs involved with assessments. It's something that we don't think about. We just don't think about the money that it's going to cost to implement these assessments. It takes people, it takes supplies, it takes computers, all sorts of things that I think here in the United States, we just take for granted. We don't realize that these other low-income countries don't have those benefits, and so that's something that needs to be considered. The cost needs to be weighed against the benefits. If the tests aren't going to give the countries what they need to improve their education systems, why in the world would they spend the money on them? So I think those need to be evaluated more closely. Top educational systems are good. We know they're good because of the results on these international assessments. Globally, it appears that the high-performing countries that we've studied in this class, such as Finland, China, and Singapore, they have the finances to administer these assessments. Do we really know how the low-income countries who can't afford these assessments are performing? We really don't know, because they aren't taking the assessments. They can't take the PISA and those. They can't afford them. So how do we really know how they're doing? We really don't know. And for us to know, we need to implement some type of testing globally so that all countries can participate in these assessments and be placed on that scale from top to bottom about where they are. Maybe some of these LICs have some good ideas and some great growth in their educational systems that we don't know about because they can't take the assessments. We don't know. So to really know who has a good educational system, assessments need to be available to everyone across the board. And so I think something that needs to be occurring is we need to be streamlining the costs and working on these assessments so that the needs are met and in a cost-effective way.